Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Crypto Philanthropy, where we highlight the top giving news, stories, and the power of crypto for good. As always, Nick Mikhalevsky, Senior Sales Manager here at The Giving Block, and joined by my colleague Pietro Moran from Shift4. Hey Pietro.
Good to see you, Nick. I am again on the road, Salt Lake City this time for the Permissionless Conference. Super stoked to be meeting clients and donors everywhere. A lot of great energy and super excited for the episode.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was going to say, how's the start of the conference been going? What's the vibe like?
First things first, I packed wrong. It's actually still very warm in Salt Lake, so that's a nice relief because I had my jackets and long pants ready to go, and everybody's out in t-shirts, so that's great. But I would say, generally speaking, very productive and constructive energy in the room. Had a really nice couple of events yesterday, just talking to folks. I think everybody is very much eyes on November, getting through election season, and then just heads down building great products and services. And then everybody seems to be very happy about where crypto's at. Prices aren't like ripping, but that's also okay. I mean, I think everybody is just very in high spirits, generally speaking, and meeting a lot of great founders that are based all over the country, which is always a pleasure and a privilege. So yeah, it's been great.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we'd love to get the debrief when the dust has settled from permissionless. And I guess looking at the topic for today, we're just going to do a quick check on markets. We call this in the industry Uptober, when crypto prices tend to go up. So we'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing there in the market, and then of course today we're coming to you from DAFday. We'll get into a great conversation we had with a very special guest, Mitch Stein, head of strategy at Chariot. So. With that, taking a look at the markets. Pietro, how are we looking today?
So today, I would say, nothing special. Past couple of weeks, we've seen Bitcoin chop around. It's kind of in this position where we're kind of making lower highs on the chart, and that just means we're kind of in a trending upward environment, but it's not like, we're up 10% every day. You wake up, it's green, awesome. And that's totally okay. For folks who may have been tuning into the podcast for a long time, I had a side conversation with one of our previous guests, Quinn Thompson, who's got a great macro background and manages a fund independently. I would say the general consensus around, a lot of the, folks who are really close to the market is that, early October, the macro environment is, going to be maybe a little choppy, maybe a little hairy, and we're going to see things kind of just move around. But at the same time, the stock market's doing really well. It's breached all-time highs in the last couple of weeks. And so we kind of expect crypto to follow in that trend. Obviously, it's not a one-to-one correlation, but you'll see, Bitcoin is hovering around that 62,000 region, Ethereum 2,400. So prices we've seen for the past couple of weeks, but I think as you get into kind of the later phases of like a bull market, or like things start to appreciate, there's always going to be a turnover. There's folks at the ETFs that are buying. We have constructive things going on there, and then we just have, I would say, general sentiment kind of remassing in the fall. Everybody, again, we talked about this in September, has come back from the beach, and now they're ready to, play the game again. And so as we go into the end of the year, it, historically has been very constructive. November has been the best performing month on record for Bitcoin, if you look back historically across the data. And so I think people are biding their time. Everybody's positive, nothing, no alarm bells sounding, but also like no fireworks yet either. So that's kind of the long and short of it there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll see. Election years are always kind of interesting. They've been all green for the last 3 months of the year in an election year, so we'll see if that trend plays out. Not sure if like we said, history doesn't repeat; it rhymes. So we'll see how closely things rhyme this year. But yeah, definitely an interesting setup to year end.
One quick point I'll make, and this is just for the folks that have probably heard this in the news and maybe followed the story a couple of years ago. One big thing to note that could be sort of like a gray swan, sort of something we know about but don't know the impact of. If you recall the FTX debacle that happened with the exchange, one of the great things is the folks who were caught up in that are now receiving their money back. And so a lot of folks are getting cash plus interest on funds that they had, caught up in this litigation. It's great that it's been put to bed. I think it's very positive for the industry as a whole. What that means, though, is they're going to be getting fiat currency, US dollars, or whatever denomination of fiat that they are entitled to. And there is speculation, or a lot of people thinking that that roughly $16 billion is going to be put to work in the market again. Not all of it, but that could create a new marginal buyer where there hasn't been one for some time. And so we're very happy to see money back in the hands of the folks who deserve it, and it's theirs. And it could prove very constructive into the seasonal kind of positive environment that you've been talking about with the election year. So that's my last comment, but it could be really interesting.
Yeah. Well, speaking of giving money back, today is DAFday, which is awesome. The first global day of giving dedicated entirely to donor advised funds. And we had some time towards the end of last week to sit down with Mitch Stein, head of strategy at Chariot, to walk us through everything around DAFs, their impact, why they're so huge, one of the fastest growing methods for charitable giving. And had a fantastic conversation. So as we are here on DAFday, we're great to bring this conversation to you guys. So have a listen. It was an awesome episode. All right. And very excited to welcome a special guest here on the show, Mitch Stein, head of strategy at Chariot. Mitch, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people have heard of you guys, certainly have seen you. You're all over sort of my social feed. But for someone who may not be familiar with Chariot and yourself, why don't you give us a little bit of background on you and the kind of work that you're doing with DAFs at Chariot?
Yeah, so as you said, my name is Mitch Stein. I'm the head of strategy here at Chariot. We are the donor advised fund payment company. So we help facilitate more DAF usage and DAF giving by putting a 3-click DAF payment option on as many nonprofit donation forms as possible, including through the giving block. So anywhere that you're seeing DAFday or that embedded DAF giving is something that we are powering on the back end. I think part of that, beyond the technology, is also arming nonprofits with the tools and resources to better market DAF giving, engage their donors in DAF giving. We really see this as the future of charitable giving and really acting like a charitable wallet through your DAF account. So it involves a lot of education and a lot of speaking on things like this.
Well, you mentioned that there's a lot going on in the industry and helping nonprofits market to this. I mean, we've seen adoption accelerating, but what's kind of been going on the last couple of years, and what are some of the things that you've seen just in 2024?
Yeah, so let's start with like the last few years, because I think that's important. People are certainly seeing DAFs, the word DAF or donor advised funds, more. I mean, for those of us that have been in the industry for a few years, I mean, 2 years ago, there was maybe an article or a session on this at a conference every so often. Now it is table stakes. Every nonprofit conference has a session about DAFs. Every nonprofit news outlet has multiple articles a month about donor advised funds. But taking a step back, I mean, these industry changes started accelerating a little over a decade ago. And I think people understand that DAFs are big or DAFs are important. But whenever I show the numbers to an audience, I see eyes just like light up, because this kind of growth is just something you don't see, particularly over such a sustained period of time. In the past 10 years, the amount of assets in donor advised funds, which means they are committed to philanthropy, they can't be used for anything else. Once you're in a DAF account, you must only leave as a grant to a nonprofit organization. That's gone up by 5x in 10 years to over $230 billion. The amount of money that is moving out of donor advised funds has gone up by 6x in the last 10 years. So now that's over $50 billion being given through DAFs to nonprofits each year. And the biggest shocker is the number of accounts and the number of people using donor advised funds is up by almost 10x in the last 10 years. So that now there are, as of the end of 2022, we'll get updated data in a month or so for 2023. But now there's about 2 million donor advised fund accounts, and the average number of users per account is 1.6. That's because the majority of accounts are used by a couple or a family. So we know that the number of people using donor advised funds is over 3 million. That obviously is a big number and exciting and something that is important to pay attention to. But like I said earlier, this is the beginning of a trend. Um, people compare donor advised funds in the structure to a 401k. There's similarities. It's a tax advantaged savings and investment account for a specific purpose. For 401k, that's your retirement. And for DAFs, that's giving and philanthropy. And there's 60 million people with 401ks. So we expect to really close that gap, especially knowing that there's way more than 60 million people who make a donation every year, and that all those people could be benefiting from a DAF, and so can the organizations they support.
Yeah, that's amazing. I guess maybe a little bit of like a, I don't know, novice question, or I message about DAFs all the time. We throw this term around. You mentioned that it's something that's showing up in conferences a lot, but that term DAF, for the donors themselves, because I remember when I first learned about donor advised funds, and I have to be honest, like when I first heard about it, it sounded very sophisticated. I thought, am I even qualified to open up a donor advised account? It sounds very professional. But when donors and supporters are thinking about this, are they as familiar with the term DAF, or do nonprofits really need to like explain like donor advised fund and kind of write it out longhand, for lack of a better term?
Really good question. Not a novice question at all. I actually bring this up in every single presentation I give. Very important, because it's certainly evolving. And I think the term DAF is being better understood and more widely used. But the problem is historically, different major DAF providers actually had slightly different terms for these accounts. So even to this day, Fidelity refers to it as a charitable giving fund or a charitable gift fund. And they're the largest DAF provider. So I think we are coalescing as an industry around the acronym, but we always encourage nonprofits to both spell out donor advised fund and DAF because it's not quite universal yet. But things like DAFday is helping to cement that acronym in people's minds. And the second largest DAF in the country, Schwab Charitable, actually just rebranded this year to DAF Giving 360. So really helping to cement that acronym for people more broadly. That also is a good flag for people. I've heard this from a lot of nonprofits when I mention that. You need to update your data team so that they know what DAF Giving 360 is, because they're going to start seeing checks from that and be like, what happened to Schwab? They have changed their name. It is still a DAF, and it should be aligned to your Schwab account in your own database.
Excellent. Very, very good tip there. And I think earlier this year, as we watched, sort of DAFs continue to be so popular. I mean, like I said, it's featured at almost every major conference. You guys at Chariot released, I guess, a pretty incredible fundraising report. Am I wrong in that this was sort of like the first of its kind, like doing some benchmark analysis? And I just wanted to quickly read off some of the stats that you highlighted, because I think they're pretty mind blowing. I'll read out these 5, and then I'll kind of turn it over to you for some context. So number 1, once someone starts giving from their DAF, the annual giving increased by 96%. Number 2, DAF revenue is growing 214 times faster than non-DAF revenue in the study sample group. The number of DAF donors has grown 79%, while non-DAF donors declined 6%. And then 26% of current DAF donors were already supporting that cause when they made their first DAF gift. That was really great. And then finally, to close things out from a retention standpoint, that on average, it's 15% higher than non-DAF donors in the study. I mean, man, like all across the board, those are some really strong metrics for nonprofits to think about.
Yeah, it was a really amazing project to work on. Thank you for bringing it up here, and I hope lots of folks go check it out. The DAF fundraising report. Hopefully, I'll have a link to download in the show notes. But you pointed out a couple really important stats. I would bucket the findings into 3 important categories. And the impetus for doing the study was the fact that, to your point, no one had ever looked at DAF giving from the nonprofit perspective before from a data standpoint. So we always had these annual figures like the ones I mentioned earlier, but those are all provided by the DAFs themselves. And it left a lot of nonprofits wondering, okay, well, how does this affect me? Or how is this affecting our organizations and peer organizations? So we took a group of 20 nonprofits of a variety of sizes and types of organizations, but it got us to a data set over 5 years between 2019 and 2023 of 78 million transactions to analyze, which let us answer three key buckets of questions. How is DAF giving and fundraising actually impacting nonprofits themselves? Are they seeing the same kind of growth as the DAF data that the DAFs are putting out? How is it impacting donor behavior relative to non-DAF donors? And how do those two donor categories differ? And then the most fascinating part was what actually changes for an individual donor when they start using a DAF. Because for the first time, we could see that level of data for the same organization, the same donor in 1 year giving with a credit card, and then next year starting to use a DAF, what changes? And that's where we saw that data point of, basically doubling their annual support of the same organization once they start using their DAF. And the fact that we had over 16,000 instances of that what I refer to as DAF donor conversion, someone moving from non-DAF giving to DAF giving. And what that should signal to everybody is you have these donors in your file that are not yet using their DAF. We saw this happen over 16,000 times just within this data set. And I would view that as the floor, because there's even more that we just couldn't even tell or know that they switched to giving from their DAF. So to a lot what we'll talk about the importance of marketing, making this easy, making it visible, and how do you find DAF donors? That's the biggest question I get all the time. You have them already. Just make it easy for them to self-identify and use their DAF.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about that a lot as well. And I guess bringing things a little bit, closer to home. So DAFday is Thursday, October 10th. We're recording this before, I think this episode is going to drop on DAFday, but where did the idea of DAFday come from, and how does that fit in sort of a larger kind of campaign for nonprofits and for Chariot too?
Yeah, it's been an exciting couple months. We announced DAFday at the end of July alongside 60 of our partners, including the Giving Block and many leading nonprofit organizations. Where it comes from, I would say two answers to that question. One was just a lot of discussions with our customers, and a lot of folks had been asking, we should do a specific DAF campaign, or how can I start my own sort of like effort around DAF giving? Like, do I just start talking about DAFs out of the blue? That seems kind of random. It feels like it's not that effective for me to do as one organization. And we threw out the idea of a specific giving day for DAFs. And it was received incredibly well by some of our top customers. And we were like, okay, if we started to kind of coalesce around this and push it forward, would you help out? Would you commit to really creating a marketing campaign with your own donor base? And we had 40 nonprofit partners that said yes and would help us launch this. And so right now, less than a week before DAFday, that's grown from 40 to almost 1,000 organizations participating in DAFday in about a little over 2 months. So it has been incredible to watch, and I think is rooted in the fact that we have more data. We have a better understanding of the value of DAF giving. We have new technology that makes it easy for someone to give from their DAF and be a part of a giving day and a time-based initiative in a way that they historically couldn't, because DAF gifts were made offline in a disconnected fashion. They didn't arrive at the organization for weeks, so no one knew about them if you wanted to be a part of a giving day. And so we can fundamentally change that donor behavior with this kind of activation. So that's really the goal, is like raising awareness of both DAFs and the value of DAFs, and giving nonprofits a way to engage in DAF fundraising in a way that feels natural instead of forced. And then also shifting that donor behavior to appreciate they can give with these online. They can do it in special time-based, time-sensitive days. And so we'll see what happens on 10/10, but I view everything that's happened up until this point as a win already for our first year.
Yeah, well, I'm super excited about it. The technology now has improved so much. I've got my DAF primed and ready to go. The technology makes it so easy to just point and click those dollars in, but most importantly, point and click those dollars out to the causes that are near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure near and dear to many those millions of account holders. Mitch, this was great. If people want to learn more about not only Chariot and the DAF resources and things that are going to be coming off of DAFday, where can they go to learn more?
Yeah, I mean, we are actively putting out a lot of this information on our LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place. Just make sure you're following Chariot on LinkedIn. Obviously, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there, as you mentioned at the beginning. And we have a newsletter that goes out every few weeks that you can subscribe to at givechariot.com. And then also just checking out DAFday specifically has its own dedicated website on DAFday.com, and you can join the movement there for further updates.
All right. And with that, hope everybody loved that. Pietro, not sure, are you poised to give from your DAF today? Do you have something set up?
That's a great, one, I learned a ton. So personally have not involved myself with a donor advised fund, don't have one myself. I think, hearing from Mitch, I would say a tool that I never considered as part of my personal strategy. But, I think that tide is changing. I think, some of the benefits he outlined and some of the flexibility that you get in leveraging a donor advised fund with what you get to do and how you get to manage your assets that way, I think, it's going to give me some homework to do. I'll say that much.
Well, I will say I was right there with you. I mean, I didn't have a DAF until very recently. And I always thought it was something that was maybe above kind of like my pay grade. But for everybody who's, DAF curious now, there are some great platforms out there that make it so easy to set up a DAF. You can fund it in probably, half the time of this episode here in a matter of minutes, and just moving some assets in there. You get that immediate tax deduction, and you've got the flexibility to grant out those dollars on your own timeline, which is fantastic. So if you are listening to this and it is DAF day, you still got time. You can set up a DAF and start making those grants. And so the great thing about modern technology, it's moving really fast. So with that, on behalf of us and the team here, thanks so much for joining. Free those DAF dollars, free those assets, and we'll see you next week.